Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's scrap meeting. I would like to begin with introductions because we have some new members joining us this year. So I'll begin. I'm Rachel Fisher. If any of you are new today, I don't think we have anyone new though. I am the Member Services Librarian for Technical Services and the liaison to Scrap. So I'm going to go through the list of Scrap members. Please introduce yourself and tell us which library you work for and anything you'd like to share about yourself today. So the first person on our list is Michelle. Feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, we can't hear you. Michelle, you can type in chat if it's not working to speak. We still can't hear you. Yes, Michelle, you can just introduce yourself and tell us which library you work for. Michelle typed in the chat that she is a cataloger at Highland Park. Next person on my list is Lynn Rubio.
Hi, I am the Acquisitions and Cataloging Manager at Des Plaines Public Library.
Tammy.
Hi, I'm Tammy. I'm from Grays Lake. I'm the cataloging supervisor. I have a blue blocker in my eyeglasses, which gives me a weird purplish look. So I apologize for that.
That's okay. My glasses look kind of weird too. Okay, the next person on our list is Nora. She's presently on leave, so she won't be here today. Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Galindo. I'm the lead cataloger at Palatine.
Heather.
I'm sorry, did you say Heather?
Heather, we don't hear you. You're welcome to type in the chat if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat. Michelle, did you mean that you could hear Heather? Because I still can't hear her. Okay. Heather typed in the chat that she is a cataloging librarian at Lake Villa. And last on our list is Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm with the McHenry Public Library District. I'm our technical services manager. Now, if you see me at random waving my arm around on the call, it's because my lights are on a motion sensor and it can't see me behind my computer monitor.
That's fine. Great. Thank you for introducing yourselves. So I did want to run through an overview of meeting dates and our process for creating minutes. So one moment, I share my screen. So this year we will be continuing to have our meetings virtually, since that has been encouraging a larger amount of people to attend the meetings. You can find a list of the meeting dates by going to the meetings drop-down menu on the CCS website, clicking on Technical and Advisory. And you can scroll down to find the title for Scrap and click on Upcoming Meeting Dates. You'll find our list of meeting dates in the upcoming list. And if you open up the arrow to expand it, you'll find the link to the Zoom meeting. If you were to use the link for past meeting dates, you'd also be able to find the links to the agendas and minutes. Here you'll find one where it has the agenda, the minutes, and the recording. I forgot to add oh, that's today's date for the minutes. I'll add the minutes here when I finish those. Okay, so what I've been doing in the past to produce minutes is I've been creating the minutes myself and then sending it out to the Scrap listserv to ask if there are any additions to the minutes or changes that need to be made. And we haven't been bothering with the process of actually approving the minutes via a motion. Is everyone okay with continuing that and just accepting the minutes as they are? I see yeses in the chat.
That's
Okay,
fine.
great. Okay, so next thing on the agenda is an update on the RDA timeline. So the PCC Policy Committee has decided that the PCC will have a rolling implementation of the new RDA toolkit that's now called the official RDA toolkit from May 1st, 2024 to April 30th, 2027. So we have plenty of time to decide to switch to the new toolkit. This is a 3-year rolling implementation that will allow institutions to transition when they'd like to, when they're ready. PCC is continuing to analyze the results of their testing period to make recommendations and create documentation. They will continue to catalog with the original RDA toolkit until instructed to do otherwise. The original RDA toolkit will be removed from the internet on May 2027, but they don't have a specific date yet. So I will need some time to update the catalogers wiki with the links to the official RDA toolkit before we officially decide to switch to it ourselves. Given that this is a rolling implementation, do you have any preference for a date to recommend implementing the official RDA toolkit?
I would lean towards the later end of that timeline, just
Okay.
so we can learn from other people's experience.
I have text in the chat agreeing with that. Since this is not till 2027 and we've been experiencing a lot of delays, I don't think we need to make any official motions yet, and we can wait to see if the timeline changes at all. And for now, we'll just tentatively wait until 2027 to officially switch over to the new timeline. I mean, to the new RDA toolkit, and we'll not make any updates yet until we know we're ready to do so. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is an overview of an RDA session on series and serials from ALA Annual. So I'd like to get your input on it. At ALA Annual, I attended a session that announced some changes to how some continuing resources, also known as aggregates or aggregating works, will be cataloged. So I'll send you a link to the slides so that you can take some time to read through them. Some of the people who asked questions at that session were very concerned and unhappy with this change. So I thought it would be a good idea to quickly summarize some of the key issues that were brought up in that presentation and see if you have any concerns about it. Feel free to take as much time as you need to like read through the material and think about it. We obviously have plenty of time until 2027 before we'd even want to consider making any changes. But as you've probably become aware, the official RDA toolkit has become more confusing than the original ones. So it introduces a lot of new vocabulary, a new bibliographic reference model, and it's just not something that people are happy with right now. So I'm going to display some of the slides from the presentation instead of making my own. One moment. Okay. So the current practice under original RDA distinguishes between monographic series, which are serials, and multi-part monographs, which are not. In the new RDA toolkit, or official RDA, the term monographic series no longer appears, and multi-part monograph is referred to as multiple unit. PCC practice will retain the distinction between the two types of series. They are referred to as monographic series and multi-part monographs in their metadata guidance documents, which is referred to as MGDs in the slides. So according to PCC, a multi-part monograph is a mode of issuance of a manifestation issued in two or more parts, either simultaneously or successfully, that is complete or intended to be completed within a finite number of parts. So that's kind of a mouthful, but that would mean that they know that a series is going to end in a specific number of books. So the example they use further along in this is the Hunger Games. Monographic series was never defined in RDA. PCC has adopted the working definition of a monographic series as a group of monographs that does not have a predetermined conclusion, each of which bears, in addition to its own title proper, a collective title applying to the group as a whole. An example that I can think of could be manga, but the example in the slides looks like a middle grade series of novels. So it made me wonder if it would actually become a multi-part monograph when the authors actually decide to end the series, but they haven't decided yet. And it seems like it could be difficult to determine if a series will actually have a finite end, or if an author doesn't, unless an author doesn't make, or if an author doesn't make a statement. So kind of like Goosebumps. So when I looked up Goosebumps, I thought of that as an example in which it ended in the past, but then came back again later on. And there's wouldn't necessarily be an indication if they end it and then start the series again, whether it's going to be a monographic series or a multi-part monograph. So these two definitions seem kind of confusing to me. So IFLA's LRM, the library reference model that is the bibliographic model for the RDA revision, it had some new concepts of WEM-lock and WE-lock. So WEM, W-E-M, stands for work, expression, and manifestation. WE, W-E, stands for work and expression. So in the official RDA, WEM-lock means certain types of aggregates, including monographic series, that can have only one expression and one manifestation. So this will mean a change for how monographic series and authority records for the series will be cataloged. Currently, because monographic series are serials, if the title changes, one would create a new description or authority record because it's considered a new work. The second point on the slide is new for the official RDA. Because they are serials, if any other aspect changes, such as a translation, or if it moves to a new format like an audio format, one would need to create a new description, such as a new authority record, because it would be considered a new work. So under previous practices, many instances of the second point would have been considered just a different expression of the original work. And this is an example of how they would do this authority record in the original RDA, in which there was a 130 for the English title. And then when the French publication was published, they would just have a record with the subfield L French after the English. But the difference will be with the new official RDA. So because of WEM-lock requiring only one expression, there will need to be a French title in the authority record for it instead of the English title with subfield L. And so this would then be traced in like the 800 subfield T or 830 as the French title instead of the English title with subfield L for French after it. And likewise for any audiobook versions, if an audiobook is created, that would be a different authority record and a different 800 or 830. So WE-lock is a static work that is an aggregating work. It is realized in only one expression, and PCC has decided not to apply this restriction. So this means that PCC will continue the practice that they used with the original RDA toolkit for multi-part monographs. If the title changes, one would use the same description for the authority record, and if other aspects change, we would only create a new expression description as we've usually been doing. PCC will continue to consider it a new expression and not a new work. And this continues the original RDA practice. So the PCC example is the Hunger Games, in which they would continue to use a subfield L for the non-English language translations. The slides also in this file do include an update from Concert. Basically, they are still evaluating the official RDA and haven't made any decisions on how it will affect serials cataloging yet. So I do see a question in the chat. How do you know if the series title has changed for a monographic series? I'm thinking of series authority records that have variant 4XX fields for various forms that have shown up on individual titles. Does that mean each of those forms would get its own authority record, or am I misinterpreting this? Let's see. So let me go back to this slide. It's definitely very confusing, and everyone is very confused by this presentation and by the definitions. So let's see. So I would say that when you compare the different series, that it does sound like even if there's a slight title change in the series, that it would require a new authority record under these guidelines. I have seen with some Harry Potter books that sometimes there's like a slight change in the wording of the series title, and I'm wondering like how much there needs to be a slight change, because if it's clearly a different imprint, it would clearly need an authority record. But I know we'd want like less records in CCS, and sometimes those records end up being on the same record, even if the titles of the series is a slight change. It's a good question. Adrian asks, why did the first example get a new authority record for the French edition, but the Hunger Games one just got a subfield L French tacked on? So I think the presenters are assuming that this specific series, Almost Epic Squad, and I don't know much about the series because we don't even have this in the CCS database. It's a French Canadian author or a Canadian author that published it at the same time in French and English in Canada, and hasn't become popular in the United States yet. So the presenter is probably assuming that this is going to be something like a series without an end that will keep going, which makes me think it's more like a comic book or manga than a novel. But it is more like a middle grade novel when I looked it up. So I think the difference that I can think about that they're trying to illustrate is something like the difference between how a comic book series can keep going on for an indefinite period of time versus how a series of novels tends to have a finite period in which there is a predetermined end. But as we know with some things like Game of Thrones, we don't necessarily know when that's going to end because the author is still writing new series and he may continue to keep that going, but we'd only have to assume that at some point it would end. So it's still kind of wishy-washy here because we don't know exactly how to determine when the end will be. And Adrian asks, so as a cataloger creating those authority records, do we just assume that it's going to continue without a determined end, or do they contact the author? I think it could potentially be difficult to contact some authors. And I mean, if you want to, you could, but I would err towards trying to just assume based on what you know about the series. But it can be hard to make that assumption. Michelle asks, I was confused by their definition of multi-part monographs versus monographic series. They said monographic series have a separate series title and they don't have a predetermined end. But what about something like Sue Grafton's Kinsey Milhone alphabet series? That one fits with both definitions. The alphabet has a built-in ending. I think these definitions and examples aren't the greatest, and I think that since we do have some time to think about it, and try to figure out how to understand how this will affect us, that maybe in that time period they could improve it and update it. So hopefully they will be able to answer these questions in more detail in future presentations. Adrian asks, but PCC isn't implementing this distinction, right? It sounds like they are implementing the distinction between monographic series and multi-part monographs, in which multi-part monographs will be cataloged with the non-English language title as a separate authority record for monographic series and that apply to WEMLOC, but will not be implementing it for multi-part monographs that the official RDA would use WELOC for, which is very confusing and to me makes no sense. We're still trying to figure this out. So I think that one thing we can do to take away any information from this is that we need to send questions to PCC and RDA so that we actually can get some more information on how to actually understand their definitions, because they're not necessarily making sense, and PCC needs to provide more guidance in their metadata guidance documents in order to understand the difference. Tammy asks if this applies to nonfiction titles like the standard stamp collection. I think that the standard stamp collection may potentially fall under CONSER's guidelines, because since that's an annual, it may, even though we catalog it as a monographic record, there might be some libraries that would use serials records for that and serials holdings records. So we might want to wait to see how CONSER decides on their options for cataloging it. In some of the slides you'll see from CONSER, it starts right here. It says PCC continuing resources updates. And there was a pilot group on concert policies. So they have slides here on different options, option 1 and option 2. So they're still trying to experiment with their options for applying Wemlock and Wheelock to cereals. And we're still waiting to hear from them on what they'll say. So I'm going to copy a link for that document and paste it in the chat. And I'll also send that out in minutes. One moment. It didn't copy that link properly. There is the link for the presentation. So I'm not the best person to answer these questions because I'm still confused about some of these definitions myself. And I think it would be great for everyone to write down all the questions that you have, and we can potentially just send them, or I could potentially send them to PCC with the documentation of our feelings about the situation. And hopefully we can get some additional answers in the future at some point, even if they can't necessarily answer them now. And I'll send them also to the RDA steering committee. Kathy asks, when would you like our questions by? You can take your time to think about it over the next month or two and send them to me personally, or you can discuss it in the scrap listserv. I didn't want to present on this at CAM yet because, as you can see, the definitions are still very difficult to understand, and I just feel it would be like too much for the whole group and for all libraries to think about. So I just wanted Scrap to just think about it and take your time to think about how this would affect our own policies and how you would potentially want to implement this. We don't necessarily have to follow PCC's guidelines. We could make our own local practice if you wanted to. Because as you can see, there is a difference between what PCC is recommending and how they describe Wheelock. So it sounds like there's going to be a difference between RDA and PCC guidelines for series and serials, but it's still hard to tell, and they could still change their mind as they create more documentation. Are there any questions about that you'd like to discuss now, or can we bring the discussion and questions to the listserv? All right, let's move on to our next topic on the agenda. So it was brought to my attention that since both Grayslake and Palatine are now using the same local subject headings for diversity topics, this has led to a very long list of headings and some records. So I'm going to bring up an example. One moment. So this is an example where we have both Grayslake and Palatine headings. And the individual was concerned that if other libraries begin to use the same headings, the list will just increase. And they wanted to discuss this to see if we wanted to continue to add these headings in the 691 field, or if Scrap would want to switch to using the 690 without the city in it, and would want to make that recommendation. I'd like to hear from both Palatine and Grayslake, since you're both here today, and see how you feel about using the city versus switching to 690 that would allow for a local subject heading of just the portion that's in the subfield X right now.
I'll jump in. So I don't know what Grayslake is using those headings for, but for Palatine, the reason we created these was for our diversity audit. So we're not using the headings just for subject analysis or for searching. We did a diversity audit on our collection last year, and we're using the headings to report on how we're developing that collection. We run a report quarterly. And so for us, it's very important to like specify that this is a heading that Palatine assigned, especially because with some of these diversity headings, definitions can be kind of subjective. So we don't know, you know, how other libraries would be applying those headings. Yeah, it's important for us to keep the Palatine in that subject heading.
Okay, great. Yeah,
For
that makes sense.
Grayslake- I'm sorry, Rachel.
Oh, you can go, Tammy.
For Grayslake, we want to use it for diversity too. But I did want to say that I think if we wanted to use it globally in the consortium, that we'd have to agree on what BIPOC includes. You know, we'd have to all agree on what the terms are standing for and what they would be used for exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And since Palatine has already done a diversity audit based on our own definitions, that's not something that we can change or adapt. We have to continue to report on those same definitions. Otherwise, you know, the report, it's not really accurate.
All right. Thanks for your feedback. I do think that since Palatine is using a specific methodology and that the definitions could vary among libraries, that we need to continue to allow just the 691s so that their methodology can continue as planned. Does anyone have any other questions or feedback about this?
Well, one suggestion would be to find out what Palatine's definitions are. And if we all agreed on them, we could we implement it then as a 690?
I think an issue that might come up would be, you know, if the library bringing in that web record assigns, let's say, BIPOC subject, it may still not be what the selector, what our selector intended, like, is counting as part of our diversity audit. So I don't know. It's a little squishy, I guess. And I think,
Okay, I
unfortunately,
I understand that more now.
yeah, unfortunately, it might be another long conversation. But...
Yeah, I agree. I think that could be difficult to coordinate with all of the selectors at all the libraries. But I could understand that if at some point Palatine does end the specific research they're doing and switches to a different methodology, that maybe we could reevaluate this again in the future. But for now, I think I would recommend continuing as planned with the 691s.
Yeah, and I think the next audit is like in 5 years or something, so it's going to be a little bit. But
Mhm.
I mean, there's no reason that we can't continue to use LCSH for just, subject analysis and searching purposes.
Right. Michelle typed in the chat that that makes sense, that they are appearing in subject headings but aren't entirely functioning in subject headings. All right. Are there any questions or comments on this topic?
My own thoughts is that if we are looking at standardizing terms and making them available for consortium wide, then they need to be something like the 650 second indicator 7 local, so that we have an authority record, we have a definition, we have an agreed upon that everyone uses.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Adrian, can you send your definitions to the scrap listserv so that you can just share it with everyone?
Sure.
Adrian, I didn't know if you heard me. Would you be able to send your list of definitions to the scrap listserv?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't know if I unmuted myself. Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. All right, that is the end of our topics on the agenda today. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to discuss before we adjourn the meeting?
At our next meeting, will we be preparing any of the topics that seem to be carried from last year? I'm going to have to pull up the minutes from the last meeting, but there was something that was going to come to a vote, and I'm
One moment. I don't remember something that we were going to vote on off the top of my head. I must have forgotten about that. Let me take a look at that. Was that from a CAM meeting that we discussed that, or was that a scrap meeting?
got here. It was in July, and review of the bibliographic input standards. Scrap members will need more time to review the page. They'll discuss suggestions via the listserv and at the next meeting. Here we are at the next meeting.
Okay.
So are there
All
things
right.
that we need to be looking at in regards to that?
So the only thing that we had left to discuss for the bibliographic input standards was the chart and how it would display the RDA rules, whether it would have references to like LCPCC guidelines. And I think that's something we're going to have to put off for a while since we're not going to be officially switching to the official RDA until 2027. So I think things could change until then. We should stick with what's currently on the in the chart that's existing.
Thank you.
Tammy just added to the chat that she noticed a lot of the young adult fiction records don't have the 655-7 young adult fiction heading, although it is coded D. I will add that to a list of things to discuss with Virginia to see if that's something she could do as a cleanup project. She's not here today. But I can also add that to a reminder for the CAM meeting. Is there anything else? All right, thanks for coming today. I am going to send out an attendance form for everyone to fill out who is here today to the CAS listserv, and we can adjourn the meeting. Have a good day, everyone.